Shalom. All right. We have not been meeting for a while due to COVID. We're trying to get rolling again. When I last met with you all, we were in the book of Ruth. I think we had done one chapter maybe. And then we went into the lockdown, and I went ahead and recorded the remainder of Ruth and put it out on the website. And then just kind of stopped with the project. We had intended to spend a considerable length of time studying the history of Jewish leadership, both good and not so good. And we went through, I believe, did we start in Joshua, and then went to Ruth, and or Yehoshua, and then went to Ruth, and then today we're going to start in Shemuel Aleph, 1 Samuel. It's important to remember Shemuel Aleph is really just half of a book. Okay, the book is so long that the scrolls in the synagogues just became huge, basically. And so somewhere along the line in history, I can't remember exactly even the century when it happened, but someone came up with the idea, why don't we just cut it in half? The length of the book, not the scroll, but when we make future scrolls, why don't we just record half of it in one scroll and half in another, so when the rabbi gets the scroll out to teach from it, to speak from it, he can just get the scroll that he needs and unroll it, and it won't be as cumbersome. And that tradition was carried over by translators later on, who may or may not have known the tradition of how that started, but they carried it over regardless. So today we're in chapter 1. It says, there was a man from Ramathaim Zophim in the hills of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, the son of Yeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Toku, the son of Zuph, from Ephrat. I want to stop there, and this kind of, interestingly, this was not planned. This was not my intention, but in the previous talk earlier today, we were in the first chapter, starting in the Exodus story. Okay, the story of us coming out of Mitzrayim. And I told you it was interesting that right there in the first chapter was basically the core of the answer to my sister-in-law's question yesterday about tracing matrilinearly or patrilinearly your Jewish ancestry. And here we are in Shemuel Aleph, and we start off with what? We start off with the documentation of the pedigree, so to speak, of the core component, or the core character, I guess you'd say, the person that this book is going to trace his life. And it says he was the son of this person, the son of this person, the son of this person. Okay, it goes down through this. Okay, and so, yeah, I just found that interesting that twice today we're coming into the way that Torah teaches us to trace the lineage. He had 2 wives. Okay, Elkanah is who we're talking about here. He had 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Okay, this is a recurring theme throughout Scripture, and of the wife who has no children and is barren, and then seeks favor from Elohim. And it's one of the reasons why I tell people who in the mainline churches, they say, well, why can't your Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox and conservative, all those, why can't those people of Jewish descent recognize Mashiach for who he is? They say they have their terms. They want to know why people don't recognize Mashiach for who he is. One of the reasons that the churches have trouble convincing people of Jewish descent, people who know the Jewish texts, the old Jewish texts, the Torah and the Tanakh, thoroughly, is that he is Mashiach, is because they base it so much of it on the fact that the birth of Yeshua was prophesied. Okay, he came to the angel came to Miriam, his mother, and gave her the prophecy that her son would be born. Okay, and then came to Yusuf, her husband, her betrothed, okay, who knew that this couldn't possibly be his child, or like biologically, and said, "Hey, it's okay. This is of Elohim. Okay, this was planned." And they look at that, and the churches say, "Well, can't they see this was prophesied?" Well, here's the thing. The birth of Yitzhak was prophesied. The births of Yaakov and Esau were prophesied. The birth of Moshe was prophesied. The birth of Shemuel was prophesied. Okay, are any of them HaMashiach? No, not in the sense that the church is talking about. Now, if you look at it, Mashiach literally means anointed. Were these individuals anointed? Yes, some powerfully anointed. Okay, so in that sense, were they Mashiach? Absolutely. But the question then is, are any of them, as the church says, the Mashiach, or they say the Messiah, or they use their terms? And the answer is no. None of these men were what they are trying to convince our brethren that he is. So do you see why people who grow up their entire lives reading the Tanakh would look at that argument and say that doesn't hold any water? That means he's a great man anointed by God. That's it. This man went up from his city every year to worship and sacrifice to Yehovah Tzevaot at Shiloh. The two sons of Ali, Hophni, and Pinchas were Kohanim to Yehovah there. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Elkanah has two wives. One has children, one doesn't. He goes up every year from Ephrat to worship. There's an old man there. He has two sons. They're worshiping at Shiloh. This is a place of worship that has been built to give honor and praise and glory to Elohim. However, it is not the temple, as we're going to read about it later on down the road. Okay, it's simply a place. It's not at this point. Elohim has not made his name to rest on Jerusalem. One day, when Elkanah was sacrificing, he gave a portion of the sacrifice to his wife Peninnah, and portions to each of her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved Hannah, even though Yehovah had kept her from having children. Why is this important? Okay, so he loved her even though she couldn't have children. Does this sound like Yaakov? He loved Rachel even though she couldn't have children. And Yitzhak, okay, loved Rivka even though she couldn't have children. And over again, we see this happen, this blessing. And but we see that there's this love that surmounts this inability to have children. Why is this significant? I'm going to tell you. It's because there is an inborn part of man, okay, that desires to create. Okay? That's why we have the arts. That's why we have the sciences. That's why we have these things, because that's a form of creation. But there is an inborn part of a man that naturally wants to create offspring. Okay? Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because we are made in the image of a creator. Yes, we're the creation. But being made in the image of a creator, we desire to create. And it's not just men. My daughter over here is a fantastic artist. Okay? She does amazing work. If you haven't seen it, check it out sometime. But there's this, as human beings, we want to create, and especially we desire to procreate. Okay, why do I have 6 children and I wouldn't mind having 6 more? I'll tell you why. Okay, because I am made in the image of a creator who has made billions and billions and don't know how many billions of human beings he's made, and all of creation. And I want to be like him. Okay, no, I'm not trying to say I'm like God. I'm saying there's a part of me that desires to live in his image. Okay. Um, he gave us a commandment to go forth and multiply because he knew that we would have that desire. He put it in us. So there's a desire in Hannah to give Elkanah children. There's a desire in Elkanah to give Hannah children. Okay. They have this longing, and yet he had a wife who was giving him children, and yet he loved Hannah despite her inability to give him children. And to me, that speaks greatly of their love for each other, his love for her especially, because he already had that part of his heart's desire being given to him by someone else, but he could still love her and oversee that imperfection her fertility just wasn't there. He loved her so much he gave her a double portion of what he had. Her rival taunted her and made her feel bad because Yehovah had kept her from having children. He did the same every year, and each time she went up to the house of Yehovah, she taunted her so much that she would cry and not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you crying and why aren't you eating? Why be so sad? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? And he's saying, why are you crying about what Yehovah has not given you? He's given you me. No, you don't have what you want, but he's given you me. Can you not take some solace in that? Because he could have given you, you're infertile. He could have given you a husband who cast you away because you couldn't give him children. But instead he gave you me. Blessing. We were talking earlier today, the last 2 days of my life have been extremely trialsome. And yet every time I came around the corner, literally yesterday, help came around the corner when I prayed and said, God, I need this. Elohim, I need to do this, and this is in the way. And around the corner on the road came my old friend who helped me out. And Yehovah worked everything out. He said, he's saying, can't you see that? Can't you see the blessing beyond the trial? So Hannah got up after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. See, now she's eating. Now she's drinking because he pointed that out to her, and she sees that. And as spouses, I don't care if you're the husband or the wife, if you are struggling, there is no one more perfectly suited to strengthen you and encourage you than your spouse. And if your spouse is struggling, there is no one more perfectly suited to uplift them than you. Okay? And it's so easy, it's in our human nature when we see the person struggling to push them down. Okay, or to act as a burden. But that is not our calling. As spouses, our calling is to uplift the other. Eli, the Kohen, was sitting on his seat by the doorpost of the temple of Yehovah. In deep depression, she prayed to Yehovah and cried. Then she took a vow and said, Yehovah Zavot, if you will notice how humiliated your servant is, if you will remember me and not forget your servant, but will give your servant a male child, then I will give him to Yehovah for as long as he lives, and no razor will ever come upon his head. So she's saying, if you will give me this specific prayer, she doesn't just say, if you will give me children. She says, if you will give me a male child, if you will make it so that my husband's name does not die out, that he will have an inheritance through me, not just through his other wife, but that I will be able to give him a son. If you will give me that, I will give you back my son. That's how important it was to her to be able to give birth, that she would be able to give that child, take that child, raise that child to weaning, and give him back to Yehovah. And she said that no razor will ever come upon his head. She is putting her son, who has not even been conceived yet, she is putting that son under the vow of the Nazarite. If you're not familiar with the vow of the Nazarite, go look in the book of Numbers around chapter 6, I think it is. Look it up. There are some very strict regulations for a Nazarite, and she is saying, I would rather have a son that I almost never get to see, that I don't get to bring up, that is restricted to your service for life, than to never have a son. I pledge all of this to you if you will give me a son. She prayed for a long time before Yehovah, and as she did so, Eli was watching her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard, so Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, how long are you going to stay drunk? Stop drinking your wine. But Hannah answered, no, my lord, I am a very unhappy woman. I have not drunk either wine or other strong liquor. Rather, I've been pouring out my soul before Yehovah. Don't think of your servant as a worthless woman, because I have been speaking from the depth of my distress and anger. Then Eli replied, go in peace. May the Elohim of Yisrael grant what you have asked of him. She didn't even say what it was that she prayed. You ever have people, and I've seen arguments both ways, but you ever have people kind of scoff at the idea of an unspoken prayer request? Okay, well, I don't even know what's being said. How can I pray for it? You can pray that Elohim bless that person and honor their prayer. Now, a lot of times it is easier to pray in sync, to synchronize, and sometimes I'll say, if you tell me what's going on, I'll know more specifically what to pray, because just like Hannah prayed a specific prayer, sometimes it helps the Spirit to pray that specific prayer on behalf of another person. However, if someone says, I don't want to talk about it, but I need prayer, I know a lot of professing believers who blow that off. He just said he needs prayer, but he didn't tell me what it was, so it must not be very important. It may be very important. It may be life and death important. This woman was depressed to the point of being angry with her Creator. Okay? And what did Eli say? Eli said, go in peace, and may Elohim give you, the prayer of your heart. She replied, may your servant find favor in your sight. So the woman went on her way, and she ate, and her face was no longer sad. They got up early in the morning and worshipped before Yehovah, then returned and came to their house in Ramah. Now, I don't know what is going on here exactly. It says they went up They did sacrifices. They came back. There was no temple to go up to, but I noticed that they were there for 3 days. Um, and it makes me wonder if perhaps, and I was just thinking about this morning. It had never occurred to me, so I need to go back and check some references. But it makes me wonder if perhaps they were there on or around what would later be called the Feast of Acclamations, or the Day of Acclamations, because of the timing of the 3 days. I need to go back and do some study on that before I can say that, that I'm pretty firm in that. But a lot of people would say, well, the temple hadn't been built yet. The true temple in Jerusalem hadn't been built yet, so it couldn't have been that. But if you think about it, the Torah had been given. Okay, so they would have been keeping the feast, even if they didn't yet know where to build the temple, or hadn't yet been sanctioned to build the true temple that was to come. Elkanah had sexual relations with Hannah, his wife, and Yehovah remembered her. She conceived, and in due time she gave birth to a son, whom she named Shemuel, because I asked Yehovah for him. That's her words. Because I asked Yehovah for him. She called him Shemuel. Who knows what Shemuel means? Shemuel means, my God has heard. Okay. Now, you all probably know the story of how each of my children has a name very much like this. Not my God has heard, although Eliana, her name does mean my God has heard me in times of trouble. But each of my children has a name that is very special to them, that is very unique, and very much a prayer or an adoration, or a statement about where I was in my faith walk at the time that he or she was born. I did that because I believe that a name is the first and perhaps the most powerful spiritual gift that a person, a father specifically, can give to his children. Okay. Now, in this case, it's the mother calling him by this name. Okay. And I don't think that's wrong. But as I talked about in the earlier talk, when the father's influence is missing in the life of the child is statistically condemned to live life poor, be involved in criminal activities, be incarcerated, and pass that cycle down to their children. It's almost impossible to break the cycle once it starts. Someone has to come to sincere faith and deeply seek a breaking of that cycle once it's started. When we have children, especially sons, but I believe daughters also, we need to not just say, hey, I kind of like that name Jehoshaphat, looking at the guy whose mother said she thought about calling him Jehoshaphat. It's not just a name that we're giving. It's a blessing. It can also be a cursing. We have to be careful throughout the entire lives of our children about what we speak into those lives. Because when we're dead and gone, they will still be hearing our voices. They will still be hearing us say the things that we said to them as children. We raise our daughters to believe they are beautiful. They'll believe they're beautiful. If we raise our daughters to believe that they are second best, they will settle for second best when it comes to husbands. If we tell our sons that they are destined to be great, that there's a blessing upon their lives, they'll seek their Creator. We tell them that they're destined to fail. We tell them that they don't measure up. They'll end up with anger in their hearts. And the first thing we speak into the lives of our children are their names. The husband, Elkanah, went up with all his household to offer the yearly sacrifice to Yahweh and fulfill his vow. But Hannah did not go up, explaining to her husband, "Not till the child has been weaned. Then I will bring him so that he can appear before Yahweh and live there forever." Her husband Elkanah answered her, "Do what seems good to you. Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may Yahweh bring about what he says." So the woman stayed behind and nursed the child until she weaned him. After weaning him, she took him up with her along with three young bulls, a bushel of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of Yahweh in Shiloh. Even though he was just a child, after the bull had been slaughtered, the child was brought to Eli, and she said, "My Lord, as surely as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here near you praying to Yahweh. I prayed for this child, and Yahweh has granted the request I asked of him." This is testimony. Did he need to know that the priest? Did he need to know that Elohim was great? Part of me says, no, he knew Elohim was great. And part of me says, maybe I'm the woman who cried out to her creator, and you said, you prayed that he let whatever I asked be Jehovah. As long as he lives, he is on loan to Yehovah, and he prostrated himself there before Yehovah. The Hebrew there I was studying on this morning is interesting. I always in the past read that, I've always heard it called as Eli prostrated himself before Yehovah. But the more I studied on it this morning, the more I came to the understanding, I don't think it was Eli that prostrated himself before Yehovah. I believe it was Shemuel who prostrated himself before Yehovah. I believe that actually was bringing him up, weaning him until he was weaned. To whatever age this was, we don't know how old he was when he was weaned. That she was teaching him how to behave properly before Yehovah and before his priest. And this little guy, not really understanding what was going on, that he was about to be taken from his mother, that she was giving him up into the life to which she had pledged him. But knowing that he was standing before the priest of Yehovah, Elohim, he gave proper adoration to his creator, even at that young age. That too, I believe, speaks to the importance of what we teach our children in their very youth. We need to teach the next generation, not even if it's not our children, we need to be teaching the next generation how to love and serve the Creator.